How a 12-year-old girl vanished for 1 year. Mother and family's shocking cover-up revealed the girl no one noticed. The town of New Britain, Connecticut, looked peaceful on the surface. Quiet streets, old houses, and a tight-knit community where everyone seemed to know one another. But behind the curtains of one modest apartment, a tragedy had already taken place, and no one realized it for over a year. 12-year-old Jacqueline Mimi Torres Garcia had once been a bright, lively girl who loved drawing and playing with her younger siblings. Her teachers remembered her as polite, quiet, but always curious. And then, one day in late summer 2024, she simply stopped showing up to school. Her mother, Carla Garcia, submitted paperwork to withdraw her from the public school system, telling the district she would homeschool her daughter. No one questioned it, not the school, not the neighbors, not even social workers. That decision would mark the beginning of Jacqueline's disappearance from the outside world. Behind the locked doors of their small apartment, Carla's once loving tone began to shift. According to later police reports, she stopped feeding her daughter regularly. The reasons were twisted and unclear. Some said control, others said punishment. Weeks passed, and Mimi's frail body began to weaken. Her voice, once bright and full of laughter, grew faint and dry. When she cried, no one came to help. Carla's boyfriend, Jonathan Nanita, and her sister, Jacqueline Garcia, both knew what was happening. They watched as the girl grew thinner and weaker. They tied her wrists with zip ties whenever she acted out. The horror stretched on for weeks, until sometime in the fall of 2024, the girl's small body could no longer endure the cruelty. Then she was gone. But instead of reporting her death, Carla hid her daughter's body in the basement. She told everyone that Mimi was alive and safe. Months later, when the family moved to another house in New Britain, they carried her remains with them, sealed inside a plastic storage bin. As months turned into a year, no one noticed the absence of the little girl who once went to school every day. No one called to ask. Her grandmother, Patricia Delgado, grew worried. She hadn't seen her granddaughter in months, but every time she asked, Carla made excuses. She's with a relative. She's doing schoolwork at home. It wasn't until October 8, 2025, that everything unraveled. An anonymous caller phoned 911, reporting suspicious behavior near an abandoned house on Clark Street. When police arrived, they found a large plastic storage bin hidden behind the property. The smell was unbearable. When the officers pried the lid open, they froze. Inside were the remains of a small child, fragile bones, fragments of clothing, and a truth too heavy to comprehend. DNA later confirmed what no one wanted to believe. It was Jacqueline Mimi Torres Garcia. The community that had once gone about its quiet routines suddenly stood still. How had a child vanished from their town without anyone noticing? How could a mother, her own mother, be accused of such cruelty? That same week, police arrested Carla Garcia and her sister. The following day, they captured her boyfriend, Jonathan Nanita. As news spread across Connecticut, reporters gathered outside the courthouse. The mayor's voice shook as she faced the cameras. "As a mother," she said, "this makes me sick to my stomach. Without that anonymous call, we might never have found her." The secret that had been buried behind walls and silence for nearly a year had finally come to light, and it was only the beginning of one of the darkest cases the town had ever seen. The video call deception. The discovery of Jacqueline Mimi Torres Garcia's body shook New Britain to its core. But as investigators dug deeper, what they uncovered next turned a horrifying tragedy into something almost unthinkable, a deception so cruel, it fooled everyone who was supposed to protect her. After the arrests, detectives began piecing together the timeline of events. Carla Garcia, the girl's mother, initially denied everything. But when confronted with evidence, the withdrawal forms, the move, and the plastic bin, her story began to change. In a quiet interrogation room, she finally admitted that she had stopped feeding Mimi in the weeks before her death. Her sister, Jacqueline Garcia, told detectives she knew the girl was going to die, but never reported it. Still, one question lingered. How could the Department of Children and Families, DCF, not notice for nearly a year that Mimi was gone? That's when investigators discovered the video call. According to unsealed warrants, in January 2025, several months after Mimi had already died, DCF scheduled a virtual welfare check. Caseworkers had reopened contact with the family after concerns about one of Mimi's younger siblings. When they asked to see Mimi, Carla hesitated, then agreed. A few days later, the video call took place. On the screen, a young girl appeared, quiet, polite, with her face partly shadowed by the poor lighting of the room. Caseworkers asked simple questions, and the girl answered softly. Everything seemed normal enough. The call ended, and DCF closed the file in March 2025. But that girl on the screen was not Mimi. Carla later admitted she had forced another child, one of Mimi's siblings, to pretend to be her dead daughter. The agency had unknowingly spoken to a stand-in while the real Jacqueline's body lay hidden in storage. It was one of the most shocking revelations the Connecticut Police Department had ever encountered. Detectives revisited old case files. They found that DCF's involvement with Carla's family went back to 2013, the year Mimi was born. Over the years, reports of neglect, custody battles, and family disputes appeared again and again. Each time, social workers intervened, helped, and eventually closed the case, believing the danger had passed. In 2024, when Carla pulled her daughter from school, no one followed up. The school accepted her homeschooling request without question. Doctors never saw the child again. Neighbors barely noticed her absence. Every safeguard failed. As the news spread, outrage swept through Connecticut. Talk shows debated the failures of the system. Commenters online demanded justice. At a press conference, the mayor's voice cracked with emotion as she addressed the crowd. "We failed a little girl who depended on us to see her, to protect her. We can't undo what happened, but we must make sure it never happens again." Even as the public grieved, the details grew darker. During questioning, Carla's sister revealed that Carla had begun taking notes for a podcast she planned to record, a podcast about what happened to her daughter. Detectives were horrified. To them, this wasn't just guilt. It was a chilling sign of premeditation and detachment from reality. Meanwhile, journalists uncovered even more disturbing facts. The aunt, Jacqueline Garcia, had a prior conviction for child abuse, a 2023 case involving her own baby, who was found with multiple bruises and fractures. Yet despite her record, she continued to live around other children. The media called it the case that exposed the cracks in every system. In court, Carla appeared pale and expressionless. Reporters noted how she stared straight ahead, avoiding the cameras as the charges were read aloud: murder with special circumstances, conspiracy to commit murder, intentional cruelty to a child, unlawful restraint, and tampering with evidence. Her bail was set at $5 million. Her boyfriend, Jonathan Nanita, faced the same fate. Cameras caught him being led out of the police station, face bruised, eyes blank, his wrists bound. When asked by a reporter if he had anything to say, he muttered just one word: "No." The more investigators revealed, the more unbearable it became. It wasn't just about one mother's cruelty, it was about an entire network of adults who looked away, paperwork that went unchecked, and warnings that were never followed up. But out of the tragedy came a growing movement, one led by a heartbroken father from Bridgeport. He called it Mimi's Law, a proposed rule that would require mandatory welfare checks on all homeschooled children and stricter oversight of families with past DCF involvement. Within weeks, the petition had gathered over 12,000 signatures. For the first time since her death, people across the state began to say her name again. Mimi, a girl no one saw when she was alive. Now the world couldn't stop looking. Justice for Mimi. The courthouse in Hartford was silent the morning the trial began. The air felt heavy, like the whole town of New Britain was holding its breath. Reporters lined the steps, cameras clicking as the three accused were brought in: Carla Garcia, her sister Jacqueline, and her boyfriend Jonathan Nanita. They looked nothing like the family neighbors once saw smiling on the porch. Carla's face was pale, drained of life. Her hands trembled as she clutched her orange jumpsuit. Jonathan's eyes were hollow, his jaw bruised from his arrest. And Jacqueline's stare was blank, as if she'd already accepted the weight of what was coming. Inside the courtroom, the charges echoed like thunder. Murder with special circumstances. conspiracy to commit murder, unlawful restraint, intentional cruelty to a child. The prosecutor's words painted a picture too grim for anyone to imagine. He spoke of a child slowly starved, of nights spent tied to the floor, of silence in a home that should have been filled with laughter. The courtroom fell still. Even the air seemed to freeze when he said, "She was only 12. And the people she trusted most were the ones who ended her life." Carla's defense tried to argue mental instability, claiming she was overwhelmed, that she suffered from emotional illness. But the prosecution countered with a detail that stunned the room. Carla had taken notes for a podcast about what she did. She had planned to record her story one day. That single fact shattered any remaining sympathy. During the proceedings, the court heard from family members, social workers, and school officials. Each one revealed a different part of the system's failure. A teacher admitted she had sent a follow-up email when Mimi disappeared from class, but never got a response. A DCF worker said they had been overloaded with cases and never double-checked the video call. And Mimi's grandmother, Patricia Delgado, took the stand last. Her voice shook as she said, "I begged them to check on her. I called. I asked. But every door was closed in my face." Her words broke the courtroom. When the verdict was read, Carla Garcia showed no emotion. She was found guilty on all counts: murder, conspiracy, and child cruelty. Her sister Jacqueline was convicted of aiding abuse and unlawful restraint. Jonathan Nanita was found guilty of participating in the murder and covering up the crime. The judge sentenced Carla to life in prison without parole. But even as justice was served, it didn't feel like enough. A child had died unseen, unheard, and forgotten for a year. That's when a movement began to rise. Across Connecticut, people shared her story online under one name: #JusticeForMimi. Vigils were held outside her old school, candles forming the shape of a heart on the playground where she once played. Children left hand-drawn notes and flowers under a photo of her smiling face. Meanwhile, Luis Fidel, the Bridgeport father who had started a petition for Mimi's law, continued his campaign. He appeared on local news, explaining how homeschooling loopholes allowed children like Mimi to vanish without anyone checking in. "No child should disappear without someone noticing," he said. "If a teacher can't see them, then the law must." The petition grew from 12,000 to over 50,000 signatures in a month. Lawmakers began to discuss the proposal publicly. Mimi's law would require mandatory in-person welfare checks on all homeschooled children every few months and would also demand body cameras for child protection officers, ensuring accountability for every case. For the first time, it seemed like change was coming, because of one little girl whose voice had been silenced. Months later, on a gray winter morning, Mimi's grandmother stood outside the old abandoned house where the bin was found. The police tape was gone now, replaced by a small white memorial cross. She placed a teddy bear beside it and whispered softly in Spanish, "You're safe now, mi nina. They'll never forget you again." The story of Jacqueline Mimi Torres Garcia became more than a crime. It became a warning and a reminder of what happens when society looks away. As reporters signed off their broadcasts and the courthouse lights dimmed, one thing remained certain: Mimi's name would outlive her silence. And through the pain, her story had finally forced the world to listen.